This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to the program. We are diving into a packed Friday, with major diplomatic moves in Pakistan and significant political headlines breaking across the United States. Let's get right into the details.
Pakistan hosts historic peace talks between U.S. and Iran.
Melania Trump addresses Epstein rumors in surprise public speech.
Vice President Vance arrives in Islamabad for critical negotiations.
Israel authorizes new negotiations with Lebanon amid regional tension.
Eric Swalwell denies sexual misconduct allegations in governor race.
Trump places full responsibility for peace on J.D. Vance.
President Trump uses graphic video to push immigration reform.
Washington reacts to Trump's sudden shift on Iran policy.
Starting in Islamabad, Pakistan has suddenly found itself at the very center of global diplomacy as it hosts high-level peace talks between the United States and Iran. This is the culmination of weeks of intense, behind-the-scenes maneuvering by Pakistani leaders who positioned Islamabad as the ideal neutral ground. It is a surprising turn for a country often preoccupied with its own internal economic and political struggles. Local residents and international observers alike are marveling at how Pakistan transitioned from a quiet intermediator to a primary mediator. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Asim Munir have both been credited by the U.S. and Iran for brokering the current two-week ceasefire. This rare moment of concurrence between two bitter rivals suggests that both parties are genuinely looking for a diplomatic exit strategy from the recent hostilities.
The stakes for Pakistan couldn't be higher because a successful outcome could radically transform how the world perceives the nation. For years, Pakistan has sought greater global relevance, particularly in the eyes of Washington, and this summit provides a massive platform to prove its diplomatic weight. However, the task ahead is daunting. Negotiators must find a way to turn a very fragile ceasefire into a lasting peace agreement, while navigating the deep-seated distrust between the American and Iranian delegations. Experts note that while Pakistan has successfully brought everyone to the table, the actual heavy lifting of policy concessions remains. If these talks fail, the brief window of stability could vanish. But for now, the sleepy capital of Islamabad is transformed into a high-security hub for what might be the most important diplomatic meeting of the decade.
Now to the White House. Melania Trump took the podium at the White House on Thursday for a speech that caught even the most seasoned political insiders off guard. Standing in the same spot where the president recently addressed the nation, the First Lady delivered a forceful denial of any links to Jeffrey Epstein. She stated clearly that she never had a relationship with Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell and was not introduced to Donald Trump by them. This move was unexpected because she typically maintains a very low profile and avoids the dramatic media confrontations her husband often embraces. By calling for public congressional hearings for Epstein's survivors, she has effectively pushed the Epstein scandal back into the national spotlight. The timing is particularly curious given that these rumors have circulated for years without such a direct public response from her personally.
The reaction to her speech has been a mix of confusion and intense scrutiny. Investigative journalists who have followed the Epstein case for decades noted that there is very little evidence connecting Melania to the files, aside from one friendly email to Maxwell. This has led many to wonder why she felt the need to address the matter so urgently now. Some speculate she may be trying to get ahead of new information, while others see it as a strategic move to distance the administration from the ongoing crisis. Interestingly, President Trump claimed he was unaware she was going to give the statement, adding another layer of intrigue to the event. Regardless of the motivation, her demand for survivors to testify on the record has created a new set of expectations for transparency that the administration will now have to navigate.
Next, Vance's mission. Vice President J.D. Vance is facing the most significant test of his political career as he travels to Pakistan to lead the U.S. negotiating team. Before boarding Air Force Two, Vance struck a confident tone, warning that while the U.S. is offering an open hand, they will not be played by Iranian negotiators. His primary objectives are incredibly ambitious. He needs to secure a permanent end to the conflict, stop Iran's uranium enrichment, and ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains fully open. This is a massive leap for the former junior senator from Ohio, who has quickly become a central figure in the Trump administration's foreign policy. While he is known publicly as a loyal supporter of the president, his private stance has often leaned toward restraint and avoiding overseas interventions, making his role as the lead negotiator particularly fascinating to watch.
Vance's reputation for skepticism regarding military strikes adds a unique dynamic to these talks. Reports suggest he previously argued against bombing Houthi targets and was initially opposed to strikes on Iran. This background might be why he was chosen for this mission, or perhaps why Iran was willing to engage with him. When asked if Iran specifically requested his involvement, Vance demurred, simply stating he wanted to be involved to make a difference. His performance in Islamabad will be closely watched by both allies and critics. He has to balance the president's aggressive rhetoric with the practical need for a diplomatic breakthrough. If he succeeds, he cements his status as a heavyweight diplomat and a potential successor in 2008. If he fails, he risks being the face of a collapsed peace process that could lead back to open warfare.
Moving to regional updates. As the Islamabad talks begin, the situation on the ground remains incredibly volatile. While Vice President Vance prepares for high-level meetings, Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fire, and Iran maintains a firm grip on the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian delegation, led by the Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Qualibaf, has already arrived in Pakistan, with a massive team of legal and military advisors. However, they have signaled that formal negotiations will only start if certain preconditions are met. Specifically, Iran is demanding a ceasefire in Lebanon and the release of blocked Iranian assets. These demands highlight the fragility of the current truce. Meanwhile, Kuwait has reported being targeted by drone attacks, which they blame on Iranian-aligned militias, further complicating the atmosphere of the peace talks. The U.S. must now navigate these regional flare-ups while trying to keep the main negotiation on track.
In a separate but related development, there is a glimmer of hope on the diplomatic front between Israel and Lebanon. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun's office announced that direct negotiations with Israel are expected to begin next Tuesday in Washington. Beirut is eager to secure a ceasefire similar to the one currently being discussed for Iran. This parallel track of diplomacy suggests a broader regional effort to de-escalate, though the path is filled with obstacles. President Trump has pointed out that Iran's primary leverage remains its ability to restrict oil traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a move that could devastate the global economy. With 20% of the world's oil passing through that narrow waterway, the pressure on Vance to secure a deal that includes maritime security is immense. The next few days will determine if these multiple diplomatic threads can be woven into a stable peace.
Shifting to California politics. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell is fighting for his political life as he denies serious allegations of sexual misconduct. Multiple former staff members have come forward with claims ranging from sexual harassment to rape. One particularly harrowing account involves a former staffer who alleges she woke up in Swalwell's hotel room in 2019 with no memory of the night and signs of sexual trauma. Swalwell has dismissed these claims as false and politically motivated, noting they have emerged just as the primary for the California governor's race approaches. He argues that as the frontrunner, he is being targeted to derail his campaign. However, the allegations have been corroborated by text messages and statements from friends, leading to a massive wave of pressure from within his own party for him to step down and exit the race immediately.
The fallout from these allegations has been swift and severe among top Democratic leadership. Figures like Hakeem Jeffries, Adam Schiff, and Nancy Pelosi have all called for Swalwell to leave the race to allow for a transparent investigation. Pelosi specifically stated that such a sensitive matter is best handled outside the heat of a gubernatorial campaign. Despite this, Swalwell remains defiant, insisting that he will stay in the race and that the truth will eventually come out. The timing is critical, because the primary is set for June 2nd, and the winner is widely expected to become the next governor of the heavily Democratic state. If Swalwell refuses to drop out, it could create a significant rift in the party and overshadow the entire election cycle. The legal battle is also heating up, as Swalwell's team had already sent cease and desist letters to accusers.
Back to Vance's predicament. President Trump has placed an enormous amount of public pressure on J.D. Vance regarding the Iran negotiations. During an Easter lunch at the White House, Trump joked that if a deal isn't reached, he will blame Vance, but if it succeeds, he will take all the credit. While said in a light-hearted manner, the comment underscores the high-stakes reality for the vice president. Vance is navigating a political minefield where he must satisfy the president, a skeptical MAGA base, and wary international allies. European officials are watching closely, noting that Vance needs to deliver a tangible result to maintain his standing on the world stage. He is representing an administration that has vacillated between threats of total destruction and calls for peace, making his job of finding a middle ground with the Iranian regime incredibly difficult and potentially career-defining.
Vance's background as a Marine who served in Iraq gives him some credibility with the military, but his vocal opposition to foreign entanglements is what really defines his current mission. He has to convince a weakened but defiant Tehran to make concessions while also keeping Israel on board with a regional ceasefire. Furthermore, he must answer to the America First supporters, who are generally wary of any U.S. involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts. Many see this trip as a preview of how Vance might handle foreign policy if he pursues the presidency in 2028. He is essentially trying to prove that restraint and diplomacy can achieve what military force could not. The outcome in Islamabad will either solidify his reputation as a master negotiator or leave him as the fall guy for a failed policy, just as the president suggested.
Now on immigration policy. President Trump has sparked a fresh debate over immigration by sharing a graphic video of a violent crime on social media. The video depicts a Haitian migrant, Robert Joaquin, allegedly killing a woman with a hammer at a Florida gas station. Trump used the footage to argue that current immigration policies are failing and that deportation protections for Haitian migrants must end immediately. He specifically called out judges for impeding his administration's efforts to eliminate temporary protected status for over 350,000 Haitians. The Department of Homeland Security also shared the video, emphasizing the senseless nature of the attack. Joaquin had previously been ordered for removal in 2022, but was granted protected status by the Biden administration. This case has become a central pillar in Trump's argument that TPS encourages illegal immigration and poses a direct threat to public safety across the country.
The legal battle over temporary protected status is heading toward a major showdown in the Supreme Court later this month. TPS was originally granted to Haitians following the 2010 earthquake and has been extended multiple times due to ongoing crises in the country. The Trump administration argues that the status has been overused and should be strictly limited, while advocates argue that deporting people to unsafe conditions is inhumane. This latest incident in Florida has intensified the rhetoric on both sides. Critics of the president argue that using a single violent crime to justify broad policy changes is inflammatory, while supporters see it as a necessary wake-up call regarding border security. As the Supreme Court prepares to hear oral arguments, the national conversation remains deeply divided over how to balance humanitarian concerns with the enforcement of immigration laws and public safety.
Finally, the Washington shift. The political landscape in Washington has been rocked by President Trump's rapid pivot on Iran this week. He began the week with extreme rhetoric, threatening to destroy Iranian civilization, only to declare a ceasefire just a day later. This dramatic shift appears to be a response to plummeting public approval for the war and growing unrest within his own MAGA coalition. Prominent figures like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly have been vocal in their criticism, marking a rare moment where the president's most loyal media allies have publicly broken with him. Analysts suggest that Trump realized the conflict was becoming a political liability, as his base largely expects him to avoid new foreign wars. This was a war of choice, and without a direct attack on the U.S., the traditional rally around the flag effect simply never materialized for the administration.
The internal pressure from the America First movement has been a decisive factor in this policy reversal. For years, Trump campaigned on the promise of ending endless wars, and the escalation with Iran was seen by many of his supporters as a betrayal of that core principle. This week, that frustration boiled over into explicit criticism directed at the president himself, rather than just his advisors. This shift is significant because it shows the limits of the base's loyalty when it comes to military intervention. As the administration moves toward a diplomatic solution in Pakistan, the focus in Washington is now on whether this ceasefire can hold, and if Trump can successfully reframe the narrative. The political stakes are high, as any further escalation could permanently alienate a key segment of his voters ahead of future elections.
That's our briefing for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more updates on these developing stories. Thank you for listening to our daily roundup.